Well, Beth, welcome to Inside Creative Minds. We're here at Sky Cafe in Mesa, and you are a tremendous artist. 50 years professionally. Do I have that right? 50 years professionally?
That's true.
And we're going to be taking a look at your work today, and we can't even begin to even see a minute amount of it. But we've got, what, 8 books?
Well, about 8 catalogs and 3 books. We just
3 books.
published the 3rd book, Arizona State University. I did a big project with them that was just finished.
Well, let's talk about your background briefly. What got you started? What made you an artist?
Well, I think I came from a very strict home, authoritarian home, and both my parents were professors, and my mother saw me poking out my doll's eyes, and she said, well, I think maybe we better give her art lessons. And I started when I was very young. In fact, I went to the Art Students League when I was about 12 years old, very famous school, and they put up nude models, and I began to work.
And you just kept on for 50 years?
Well, you know, there are ups and downs in every career, but my first husband courted me with Arizona highways under his arm. It was a very cold winter in New York, and I showed him 3 paintings of a view from my window, one very realistic, one semi-abstract, and one very abstract. And he came out here and brought me out, and I've been in Arizona on and off ever since. I moved to New York in the 90s because I've been showing in New York quite a bit, and I've shown all over. But I love Arizona. So I guess my work really developed here because of the desert.
Well, how would you describe your work? I mean, it's
a good question. You can't really type my work.
Right.
My work, basically, my work is about the same thing over and over and over because I work in series, and every series has absolute integrity.
Okay.
And so it's just like if you're beating a heart in China or in Russia,
right,
or in South America, it's the same heart that we have here. And so my work is really about trying to interpret wisdom systems.
Okay.
And like any wisdom system, any religion, any great master of philosophy or spirituality says the same thing, that all life is sacred. And so whatever project that I've done, and I've done them in quite a bit of depth, I study a lot and then go into the studio and try to forget it.
Wow.
They all say the same thing, that all life is sacred. And although I believe this truly, I don't think we've learned it yet as a culture, as a species.
Well, what I was so amazed is when we went to your studio, and we're privileged enough to go into your house and see your work. You live amongst your art, and it is amazing work. How does that feel to wake up every morning and you see your artwork's all around you?
Well, it keeps changing because very early on when I moved here, in the late 50s, I was used to beautiful green trees and grass, and it was desert, and I hated it. And so I started painting the landscape and going into the desert, and the work got bigger and more wild, and I would always put it up. Yeah. And so my walls keep changing as the work changes. Actually, when I really started to love the desert, and you have to do this if you haven't, I went down the Colorado River in a raft. Have you done that?
No, I have not.
It's amazing. I did my first trip in the early 70s, and that's when my work really changed. I had been a pretty traditional watercolorist, and the rocks go back 5 billion years, and I woke up with the sun, and I went to sleep when it set, and I realized that I didn't want to be another landscape painter. And I had done 3 series, an air series, a water series, an earth series. And when it came to fire, I realized I needed to work with fire as an art form. Now, you know what that is?
No.
Well, I kind of researched all the artists who've worked with fire and had a big show at the Scottsdale Center in 1978. Well, what I did is I started doing this, I call it a process ritual about life, death, and rebirth, because being Jewish, I started to go to Israel at the same time, and I realized that I didn't like the idea of entropy, that everybody just lives and dies. So I called it Ordering, Disordering, Reordering, Life, Death, and Rebirth. So I rolled out the paper, I burned it, which was a form of death.
Okay.
And also, fire has always been a transforming energy source in many spiritual religions. And then I started working with the earth of Arizona.
Right.
I took the earth from the bottom of the Grand Canyon, and then later I went to different countries around the world and worked with earth and fire. And my big project with earth was going to Israel and working at 10 sacred sites.
Now, what year was that? Was that in the 80s? Or?
That was in the early 80s.
80s?
It opened at the Jewish Museum in New York.
Yeah.
That was my second traveling museum exhibition. And the exciting thing about working in Israel was actually bringing back the earth and working with the earth.
So you actually brought it back in boxes? Or?
I would keep sending boxes home of earth.
Wow.
And I actually rolled out the paper at the site. So I was in Jerusalem, and I got special dispensation, not from the Pope, but from whoever was in charge of earth and taking it away.
Wow.
And I worked with the earth, and I went to a lot. I went to the Red Sea, and I honored a woman in history. Because I'm a feminist, I wanted to honor women in history who had made an absolute contribution to their culture.